Hey, welcome to Awkward Conversations in the Quarantine 2020. This is the final installment for the time being. And I want to thank those of you who've sent questions in, your comments. And actually, it was because of some of the comments that we decided that we would just do a recap of some of the questions that we were asked. So we're just going to get right to it right away. And hopefully, these will help you, cause you to think. You may not agree with everything you hear, but that doesn't matter. At this juncture in our society, we need to be able to listen, to hear, and to go away and contemplate. So hopefully that will be the case for you today. One of the questions we got is, should I feel guilty for being white? And again, I say, please, 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 you do not need to be made to feel guilty for being white. Virtue signaling has continually been happening over the recent weeks. Don't ask for forgiveness for being white. In fact, there are many who say this to make themselves feel better about themselves. Apologizing for things your ancestors may or may not have done are not going to do a great service right now. History is there for us to learn, and when in error or in question, not to repeat. You can feel sorry and you can empathize for the pain that I may have felt or another Black person has felt for discriminatory practices and actions that have happened, but don't ask for forgiveness for something that you didn't do. In as much as I need not feel guilty for being Black, the reverse is true, that you shouldn't be made to feel guilty for being white. A lot of people have preferences and biases, and I really believe this is where the main crux of a lot of matters stand. We do it where it concerns the friends that we hang out and the type of things we like to do or not do. Are hiring practices racist, or maybe more things are preference or biased? I remember a time when I went for a job interview, and it was interesting as I showed up that when they saw me, they said, "Oh, we weren't expecting you," because my diction sounded differently than what they expected. And so they were expecting someone else. So they had already had a bias on the phone call. I did get the job, but it was interesting. Systemic racism means that it's in the system. It means that the poison is in the water. There's nothing you can do about it. Here in Quebec, our premier said not too long ago that there was no systemic racism that he could see. Is he racist? I would say no, but there are those in leadership who allow or let discriminatory behaviors continue because they have a blind bias or preference that causes them not to see what others see. Are they racist? Of course, yes, but everything is not racist, and to say everything is racist cheapens and actually blurs when true racism occurs. For me, I believe that a lot of it is biased and preference oriented, that sometimes people do things. And again, I'm not saying it's right, but if we could understand the terms, because I've learned a long time ago that terms and understanding those terms helps us in terms of how we proceed. As I said before, when we say systems, we are taking the onus and the responsibility away from the individual. And I really, really believe that it's important that we put the onus on individuals, because racism is a heart problem. It's an issue problem of the heart. And it really stems back to the choices, the actions, and the values and truths that one has, and how we interact and how we treat other people. And if we're going to be completely honest and true, there's a healthy dose of racism that comes from some in the Black community that must be acknowledged and dealt with as well. Should we defund the police? I believe that it's important that we clear up and clean up the bad ones who wreck the name for the good, who protect and serve. We have seen in the American cities that have already defunded or scaled back their police departments the skyrocketing criminal activity, killings, robberies, etc. In the places where the elite and those not readily affected, who have been voicing their defund measures the most, are in just as much trouble, if not more, because of the lawlessness in those communities. Isn't it funny that some of the same ones crying defund, a lot of stars, a lot of high-profile people, a lot of those people who are crying defund have 24-hour security details, security fencing, etc., keep the mobs out of our neighborhoods? Don't you think that sounds a little hypocritical? Change must happen in those departments that have systemic issues and problems, but it's too easy to blanket statement defund. Someone said to me that defunding the police is on the table for them, except they don't live in an area where the police issues are like others. In fact, very, very minimal. Would the opinion change if they lived in an area where defunding police gets you the type of violence and trouble the present defunding in those places have created? I, for one, don't want to live in the wild, wild west scenario where if I call 911, I'm not getting the police. We need to fix what is wrong, but to knee-jerk emotional judgments gets us no further along the track than where we were. Can black people use the N-word? Or why can black people use the N-word and white people and others cannot? If you heard my earlier response, if you know anything about the descriptive of the word, which started in Spain and then went to France and then moved over to the Americas, that word that they use, Negro, they try to find a word to describe what they felt about their slaves. And the word actually has a derivative of that you're beneath the dirt, there's no value attached. So I cannot understand how a black person could ever use that word to another black person, because basically we are saying that you are beneath the dirt, you have no value attached to it. And people have tried to add the Z word to it and say, oh, because we're brothers and all the rest of this. Hey, I would never say this. And when other black people have tried to use this word to me, I've told them, don't say this. So I just want to make it very, very clear that if you ever use this word, now you know exactly what it means, and you have full knowledge of the fact that you're saying to someone, whether you're black or whether you're white or anybody else, that you have no value, you are beneath the dirt. So I don't understand how anybody would want to say this. And to own this word, as some have tried to say, we can own this word. You can't own dirt and freshen it up. You cannot make it better than it is. There's nothing good about it. So I would say that this word needs to be derailed, thrown out, stricken from the record, because no matter what hip hop star says it, no what sports personality, no matter what news commentator says it, now you know that it means beneath the dirt, you have no value attached, and I, for one, don't believe it. The poison will always be in that word. Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. We need to make sure that when we say that, we understand exactly what we mean and are careful not to be supporting a group that seems to have more than black lives on their mind with their political agenda, and we didn't even know it. Some of the things that this organization espouses, they want to burn the system down, figuratively or literally. They want to turn over, destroy the family unit as we know it. They espouse communist and Marxist ideology. But more than all of that, they have exposed themselves as a group that will use the death of a George Floyd to advance their agenda, but they have not raised a voice to the young black children that have been killed in the last 2.5 weeks, to gun violence, the black on black violence. So only some Black Lives Matter, and they are cause advancement Black lives. Yes, Black lives matter, and all of them matter just as your life matters. We need to make a point of being cognizant of treating each human being that we meet with dignity and respect, and not just glorify the ones who unfortunately make the news headlines. It is sad and frustrating when those events happen, but it has to be, and it must be, that every life matters, and that includes every black life, every white life, every Hispanic life, every indigenous life, every Asian life, etc. And I trust that you get exactly what I mean. I remember I had a life-changing experience when I went to Los Angeles a number of years ago, and I worked in a mission, and we worked predominantly with the homeless people for a while. And the question I was asked before I left, didn't you notice the homeless people in Montreal? And I think I did to a certain extent. But it was on that trip that I realized that I did not appreciate the lives of the many, many homeless people that scoured the streets of Montreal. And when I came home, it profoundly changed me. And that I recognized, and I even ran a homeless center for a little while, that these precious people mattered. No matter how they got there, they mattered. And in the same respect, I would say to you that we need to be careful about the organization Black Lives Matter. Let us espouse that Black Lives Matter, but the group and the organization has some failings and some things that I don't know that you and I would want to put our name to. Do you really feel that relationships are the key to breaking the racial divide? I call this in some earlier posts, who's coming to your house? Hospitality. A lot of us, we want those organic friendships. And I have a couple. I have one that's been 45 years long in the making, still in the making. And it's basically been organic. But honestly, in this day and age that we live in, for things to really change, we must become uncomfortable enough to reach out to those who we would have not ordinarily reached out to in the past. And there are actually benefits to doing this. Once we get past the discomfort of being uncomfortable, there are benefits. We learn about different people and cultures and customs and things that people are like and they're not alike. It breaks down a lot of misinformation. It leads to understanding. We develop empathy, which is one of the greatest things that I think could come out of this whole period of time. All the unrest is that we would develop empathy for each other and understand and learn to understand where someone's coming from, because it really helps in the relationship building. It helps us to work towards having honest conversations, not having fluff after. A lot of opening relationships, we have little fluff, it's surface because we're trying to get to know each other. But as time goes on and we work those relationships, we start to have honest conversations. We start to know who this person really is. And it allows us to be real. And so I want to encourage you to really consider that. If you haven't done so already, you should really be considering, who am I going to reach out to? What am I going to do to reach out to the person that I really haven't gotten to know over many years probably, or maybe just a few. But what would you do? So as we close, racism at its core is a heart sin, so to speak. One misses the right mark problem, and responsibility needs to be dealt with on a personal level first and foremost. Not everyone is racist. Some issues are because of preferences and biases which show up, and I have preferences and biases as well. And at times, sometimes they appear as discriminatory, which we need to be aware of and make the necessary personal changes we need to. Systems need to be changed when individuals who are in places of authority exhibit bias because they have not had those personal changes when it comes to racism. But it must be a personal change that makes the difference when it's all said and done, because we can make all the legislative changes, all the regulatory changes, but if there's not personal change, we haven't gone too far. What are you doing to reach out to someone you wouldn't have before? What are some of those things? A lot of the shops in my area are opening up. The restaurants are starting to open up. Coffee shops are starting to open up again. The parks are open. What are you doing? What am I doing? What things am I going to do to reach out to connect with people? I hope we're not canceling friends who disagree with us. One of the shameful parts of this unrest has been the canceling of friendships. Some people who just can't agree, or they don't want to agree, or they don't want to see another side, and they've gone, that's it, gosh darn it. If you don't agree with me, I'm canceling you, I'm unfriending you. And it's such a sad thing. I hope we're not trying to overpower others with our opinions and justify our positions as the only right and we're the only right ones, and we alienate in the process. If something's wrong, let's fix it. If the problem runs deep, let us look for deep solutions. If we're part of the problem, and I say that me as well, let us be part of the solution. That's what true humility calls for. Let the truth come to light. There's no reason to be fragile. Let us do what is right. And if we're falsely accused, we need to push back with the truth. Hospitality and the whole act of reaching out and showing a kindness is so important in these days. It's been important since COVID started, and as we are slowly moving out into different phases, it matters even more so. So many people have become fragile mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and even though this is talking about the racial side of things. Really, when you think about it, we're dealing with people and we want to connect. So hopefully that's been helpful for you. And as usual, if you ever have any questions or comments, please be free and feel free to send them along. And at some point down the line, we might continue this in a different format. But once again, thank you. God bless you. I hope you have a great week. And hopefully this has made some sense to you, or at least at the very least, caused you to think. Thank you. Have a good day.